You're listening to Redesigning Reality with Dylan Charles and Jeff Anthony.
All right, well, let's get started with this. This is Redesigning Reality, the podcast. I want to say thank you to all the people tuning in out there, wherever you are, whoever you are, whatever you may be doing at this particular moment. I am Dylan Charles, kicking it with my good bud, Jeff Anthony. How's it going, my man?
It is going swell.
Right,
it's really good, dude. Everything's good.
Yeah, that's good.
It is good. It feels good. It feels nice. The seeds, the pods, the leaves, everything's popping here, dude. It's like super sunny and nice. You can probably tell from my camera setup here. It's like a sunny, beautiful day, and how can you complain when things are so beautiful outside? You know,
yeah,
I mean, you can. But
we've transitioned to shorts and flip flops just within the last week, and so it's nice, man. After spending so much time in Costa Rica, it's kind of like feel like myself again.
Right, dude. Like got that homey vibe.
Yeah, freedom of the toes. Legs can breathe. It's all goodness. But yeah, it's beautiful here too, man. Summer's here. I mean, I guess it's spring technically, but it went from, like 40, 50 degrees to 85 degrees in a few days. So
yeah.
How is it that I was ending up talking about the weather? I mean, is that just like what we do to get into the flow, or?
I think so, and I think it also it's a window glimpse into our realities, right? So we're talking about redesigning reality here, and we're letting you in on what our daily lives are like here. So we're not in the 80s yet here, brother. It's like 45 degrees every morning still, but we hit 72 yesterday, so it felt amazing. So.
Speaking of reality, a few weeks ago we did a show that we kind of did an outtake on and tossed it in the trash because it wasn't flowing the right way. But we started off talking about something that I wanted to bring up again because it's a window into your reality, Mr. Jeff Anthony. But you just got some new wheels. You want to tell these folks about your new wheels?
Oh, my scooter wheels, my high speed, low drag scooter. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. I've been riding it around more and more, and it's been a funny thing. Number one, people are gonna look at you because they're like, "Yo, what's that?"
Hold on. What kind of scooter here? When you say scooter, you think of, when I hear scooter, I think of like a little Vespa or a little like a step through.
Right.
Tico mobile.
No, it's a mobility scooter. It's so it's a 3-wheeled mobility scooter, but it looks nothing like a traditional 3-wheeled mobility scooter. It's got like turn signals and headlights like a street scooter would have. It's got a little, heads up display with the little speedometer and a charge thing, and it's got little handbrakes and handlebars like a scooter has, and it's all black, and it's got like chrome wheels and everything. It's really neat, and goes like 20 miles an hour too, which is also cool for that's like the Evel Knievel of mobility scooters. So,
but it's not something. It's not something that you got because you had this vision of rolling around in a scooter. It's a necessity for you, no?
Right. It's something I got so that I could be more active. And when the weather's awesome like this, my son's got one of those battery powered little scooters that goes 15 miles an hour. So now I could smoke him. We were racing the other day. But it's just so we could go to parks and I can actually be in the park and not in the car watching my family having fun in the park. So it's just, like sometimes you got to invest in your own happiness, and that's what it was. I mean, it wasn't a cheap thing. It cost me a couple $1,000, but it's the best, probably a couple $1,000 that I've spent in a long time.
Yeah, a friend of mine from Costa Rica, this old army dude, he said, he sent me a note the other day and was like, "Hey man, I'm listening to your podcast, cool stuff." I was like, "Oh yeah, it's my bud Jeff, man. You'd probably like him a lot, man. He's a Navy dude." He's like, "Oh really?" Because you don't exactly look like a militant individual with your massive goatee and your earrings and your wackadoo backwards hat or whatever it is you got going on, man. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, man, he's an interesting guy. And this friend of mine, he's a really interesting guy, but he does a lot of work and did a lot of work in military intelligence and stuff, and has been all over Africa and everything, And so he's real into like the soldiering life and puts a high premium on security and like protecting people. He's what you would call a sheepdog.
There you go.
And so yeah, he was intrigued because you don't fit the look. And so I told him, about your past of the military and how the way that you frame it is that you got a bunch of vaccines and crap injected into your body in the Navy, and that started the process of like some sort of degenerative muscle disease. It hasn't even really, it's been sort of nebulous. There hasn't been really clearly defined. But so he asked me, he was like, how's he doing? And I was like, well, man, to be honest with you, like it keeps, his mobility and his, it just keeps kind of going down and downhill. But he seems to be taking okay care of himself, and he's got a new scooter. So.
And you know what's funny too, to speak more on that a little bit, is my son is in this basketball league through the YMCA here, and you know how it is when you're the new kid. Some of the kids that have been playing for a while, they kind of razz you and just be a little jerky and stuff, and people were doing that, and then all of a sudden I showed up at his practice on my scooter, and the kids' eyes got big, and they're like, dude, is that a motorcycle? Is that guy riding a motorcycle in here? And they were like, oh, no, it's a scooter. Oh, that's a cool scooter. And my son said it was really funny because he said, man, a couple of those kids are always kind of mean to me. But then, they saw you and they saw the scooter. And he's like, they realize that you're, I guess people label me as disabled. It's not a label I give myself. But he was like, they think you're disabled, and all of a sudden they're like being nicer to me. And I'm like, hey, dude, whatever, man. Like, roll with it. So that's what I do. I mean,
literally roll with it in the scooter.
There you go. No pun intended. But I've had all those funny things. Like I've had people talk really loud to me like I'm deaf because I have a wheelchair or something. And it's funny, dude. I mean, you gotta laugh at yourself and be able to laugh at yourself, and you got to be able to laugh at them too, And I always try to tell jokes. And I was joking with you earlier about how telling people I brought my chair with me when we were waiting for a theater to open one day. So, it is what it is, and you can choose to let these things get you down, or you can be like, hey man, like there's tools out there for me so that I can do my life to the best of my ability, and that's what I try to do.
Yeah, well, I think you're doing it well, my friend.
Well, I appreciate it. And then, like I just can't stop. I'm one of those like you can't get me down kind of dudes. I mean, not for long. You could trip me and make me fall pretty easy, but I'm going to get up and I'm going to go find some other thing I want to do, and I'm doing it again. And, we've talked a little bit about the barbecue trailer, but that's in full swing, and it's exciting. And, people look at me like, you're going to do that? Like, you're going to do that? I'm like, yeah, I'm doing it to inspire you too. So it's really fun, dude. And I don't ever think, like I said, I don't think about the things I can't do. I just think about the things I want to do, and I go figure out a way to make it happen.
Yeah, what's interesting is, I'm thinking, I'm going through some transitions too, just with business and life. After living in Costa Rica for 7 years, find myself in the States, and it's a whole different pace. And but there's a whole lot more opportunity here. Like it's a whole lot more opportunity, not just in terms of business, but in terms of things like stuff to do with the kids, stuff that you can do together with the kids. Like this weekend we're going camping. There's no camping in Costa Rica. One guy let me just bounce into a quick story here. A friend of mine went camping one time down, Palomar Norte, right by you, where you're at.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, good guy, man. He went down. He was going to go down to the Osa to some medicine ceremonies, and took the bus down to Palomar Norte, and decided it'd be a good idea to camp out there for the night to wait for the bus or the boat on the Sierpe River to take him out to my friend's place, and thought it'd be smart to pitch a tent on the side of the. I
have a funny feeling I know where this story is going already.
Yeah, it's going. It doesn't end well. So they wake up in the morning to some guys like shaking their tent, going like, "Hey, yo, get out the tent." And so they pull out the tent. There's 3 guys standing there with machetes. They're like, "Yo, we're gonna chop you to pieces." My friend's like, "Oh God, here we go." And yeah, sure as day, man. This guy's ransacked their tent, took all their money, all that kind of stuff. And luckily his girlfriend had the foresight to for some reason, I don't know, people don't usually do this, but had the foresight to put the passports and like the bulk of their money was like $2,000 or something big like that, like underneath the tent, which is where she like had this premonition. She never does that kind of stuff, and put it underneath the tent. So they ransacked the tent, took all this stuff and money and everything, but they didn't get like the big stash. And so, yeah, but we get to go camping here in the nice, safe United States. But anyways, going through a transition, I was going to say my point, to back all the way up, kick a little reverse in here, but to back all the way up, my point was that when you're going through a transition, sometimes, man, like what I'm feeling is like the answers aren't always clear. Like there's not always a clear path of where you're supposed to go next. And so in that process, it's a little bit of believing that you're going to get to where you're supposed to go. A whole lot of believing, I'd say, just a whole lot of belief in the outcome. A whole lot of trust, really trust more than belief, trust in the outcome, and patience and forgiveness of the self, not being hard on the self for not having the answers. And then also the ability to like to read, follow, or I guess the best way to put it would be to pay attention to your intuition. And when something sparks up and creates that excitement within you, then that's the direction you're supposed to go in and see where that's supposed to take you next, And I think you're seeing this with your new plans, your new endeavors you have lined up. So,
absolutely. I mean, like you and I were talking earlier on the phone this week about visualizing and seeing and having a clear path of your vision and realizing, hey, I can make all this happen. And that part feels invigorating and exciting, and it gets you all pumped up to do awesome podcast shows with lots of energy and vigor. But then, they tell you that all the requirements for what you need are online, and you go and you read them, and then you start the ordering process of building this system that you need to have in place. And then somebody who's already in the system is like, yeah, no, they changed that. You have to do this other thing now. So, it becomes muddled, but you still have that clear vision to the end goal. And that's where the trusting that you were talking about comes into place, and realizing it's all going to sort itself out, right?
See, you're talking now about the intersection of the individual and the matrix, right? I mean, think about all the things you could do if there were no limitations on you, right? If let's say the economy worked better and it wasn't, we didn't have to have X amount of dollars to do X, Y, Z or whatever. We just had to rally support from our friends and go do whatever we wanted to do. In the case of what you're doing, you're looking at thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of fees and paperwork and nonsense. I was listening to some Alan Watts. You're familiar with Alan Watts, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the philosopher, sage philosopher, and he was talking about that, about how some people, he was talking really about how most people don't do the work that they want to do, and he was giving the example of doctors, right? He's like, I have a good friend. He's a doctor, and if you ask him what he does, or he's like, I asked him how much time he spends on serving his patients and learning more about his craft, and he's like, I probably spend about 30% of my time actually serving people, and he's like, what are you doing the rest of the 70% of your time? And the other 70%, he's like, I'm literally dealing with paperwork, records, government stuff, all of this.
Insurance.
Insurance, everything, And so like the way Alan Watts framed it, which I thought was pretty cool, he's like, in the culture that we've created for ourselves, like anything that you do doesn't exist until it's recorded. And so he's like, now that's what you see, like, people be hanging out having a good time at the Grand Canyon, and somebody's like, oh, let's get the camera, like it doesn't you weren't
really there unless you have a meme.
You weren't really there unless you have a meme. Now keep in mind, he's talking, he's saying all this stuff, 30, 40 years before social media, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
And so now you look at social media and you extrapolate that to what we have going on here, and it's like the insanity of it is so clear. So, but he was talking about how one of his friends was a farmer that grows avocados, and so he asked his friend about how this all works and stuff, and his friend said, he's doing his business, growing avocados, and the government guys show up at his farm, and they're like, hey, well, you need to fill out these papers, and his friend's like, look, dudes, I don't know the answers. It's like dozens and dozens of forms, and he's like, I don't know what to write inside the little boxes in your forms. Why don't you guys do that? And he said it was really funny because he was actually able to talk the government guys into sitting down and filling out all these forms for him.
Right? That's awesome.
And he's like, my job is I didn't apply to
grow avocados.
Exactly. Yeah, my job is to grow avocados. I didn't sign up for this to fill out forms.
Well, that's the whole that whole thing, the popular thing people are saying right now, and highly misused and overused, is the "you do you, baby, you do you." But that's kind of what the guy was trying to tell them. Like, hey man, I'm the avocado king, and you guys are the government bureaucracy paperwork guys. So why don't you do what you do, and I'll do what I do. So, and And it's funny because you can get caught up on all these things. And, you asked me when we first started talking today how things were going. And I told you, well, they're going. And of course, there's obstacles and hurdles to leap over. But, when you have that clear vision and that clear path to the end goal of where you want to get, man, you can get aggravated and frustrated and hung up on crap. And it can seem at that moment, though, it can seem like the whole thing's going to fall apart. Or you can just be like, yo, there's 25 other food carts in this town. They did it. I can do this. It's all doable. It's all attainable. It's all possible. It just depends on what your attitude is.
What it requires, though, man, and this is something I've learned before in my life, but I'm learning it again. Because, you like as time goes by, you evolve and you step into new stages of your life, and you want to do more and more things with your life. But what it requires is it requires a vision. And you and I were talking about this the other day, just in a personal conversation about, there needs to be a vision for where you're going. And you can't, it's not that you can force a vision to materialize for your life or for your, your next venture, for even, for a career choice or anything. Sometimes you just have to kind of simmer and be open to it. But what's interesting is that when the right vision is presented to you somehow, like it really can blossom in your mind. I mean, it can freaking take off. Like you can go from no vision to like, everything literally in a couple of days, like kind of something I'm going through right now. But that's the idea, man. The idea of how like the mind creates reality, of how we get to choose to what Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And another way to look at that is I'm thinking of this quote. It's not coming to me right now, but basically like, you get to create the way that you perceive. You get to decide on how you perceive the world, and in that you can create a vision for yourself by choosing to concentrate, to open up to possibility.
Right, which is why I was saying earlier, I don't label myself as a disabled person. I'm specially abled to do things that other people aren't in the position to do that I'm in. Right, so that's kind of the way I look at it, and I use my mind in a different way. I have to think through scenarios because I may not physically be able to manipulate a situation, but I can mentally, manipulate a situation to my ultimate goal. So, and that's what I've done, and that's what's so cool about this team that I'm building right now with this barbecue trailer thing is I got a big old 6'4" hoss that wants to like throw down with me, and we're going in partners. And he's like, man, without you, this doesn't, he just told me that over the weekend though. He was like, man, without you, this doesn't happen. Like this just does not happen. I couldn't do this. So, but he's also a math professor and he's like super into numbers. And so I told him, I'm like, dude, I'm really good at blowing budgets. So please get us under control, So I like shiny things that bling. So, pull the reins in on me if I'm about to do something stupid, So it's really cool. And I think that's the neatest part about the thing you were saying about having a vision and once it materializes and what it is realizing what are your strengths and weaknesses, right? Right. Something my grandfather taught me, who's a very, very wealthy, very accomplished man before he passed away at the end of last year was, Jeff, I've never been the best at anything. I just do my best at what I know. And then I go out and I find the best to help me in this. So I went out and I hired the best real estate attorney. I went out and I hired the best accountant. I went out and hired the best business manager to manage my motorcycle dealership. And I mean, the guy, ended up worth like $20-30 million by the end of his life. And the guy had a 6th grade education and he knew that, he grew up in the Depression and, left home and then joined the military during World War II and did all that stuff that, the greatest generation did. And he achieved great success because he realized, man, I'm just like a barefoot, cotton picker, literally from, Louisiana. And I don't have a higher education, but there's a lot of people out there that do, and I can pay them. And so he built a team, and it's all about that. It's about team building. It's about, but sometimes the person at the top is the visionary, right? They just have the vision. And my granddad sure had that. He was he could see things that were going to work, and he was always. Another thing we were talking about in our conversation this week is you have all these different evolutions of who you are and a different iteration that manifests itself as you evolve. And that's what I think both of us are in a transitional period right now. And another evolution of Jeff is appearing right now and of Dylan. And we're going to follow that through and see where it takes us.
Dude, we've said the word vision or visionary like a dozen times already in this short first chunk of the podcast here. And you know where I'm going with this.
I do.
always like the value of the visionary experience, plant medicines. Man, I've had some experiences on those where like, you see yourself in a totally different light, capable of a totally different set of, in a totally different capacity. You see yourself living in a totally different way. Had this really funny vision one time. There was a girl there that was at some of the ceremonies we were doing in Costa Rica, some of the ayahuasca ceremonies, and she was one of the local indigenous girls from the Brunca tribe, and she was there helping out. Awesome friend of mine, and I had this vision, this incredible vision one night where literally, like when you go inside the space and you're in your mind, you think it's. While you're there, it's just as real as as I'm sitting here talking to you. But the vision was that I had married her instead of my wife, and so I had this whole like life built with this other girl, and so I saw like, but she was from Costa Rica, from the the indigenous part, the southern Pacific side of Costa Rica, and so my life was based around her community and her tribe. And so I saw myself as this incredible, detailed, perfectly clear vision of me living with her and, like living in one of those open air houses that you live in Costa Rica, right? And doing all the cooking, and like there was like plantains growing everywhere and bananas and oranges and everything growing everywhere. And so I woke up in the morning and I told her all about this. Like we had kids and everything. Our kids were running around. It was funny as hell. And I had met her through her grandfather, who was an elder. Don Guillermo. He's an elder of the tribe's 80-something-year-old gentleman, and just an amazing person. And I told her in this vision, I said I had this vision, and like we were together, and our children looked like a mix of me and Don Guillermo. It was hilarious. Mm-hmm. So funny, but I had a vision one time of myself, and I'm not going to go into the details, but when I came out of it, I realized that I was capable, and like there was so much more I could do with myself. There was so much more that I had such a greater responsibility to myself than I ever had imagined before. And life changing, man.
Well, yeah, because sometimes reality can be limiting, but a vision is all possibility, right? So,
right.
You don't see the limitations. You don't see the little snags and we changed the exact law or rule on, what the definition of a sink is, on a food card or something, and so everything just kind of flows in a vision quest. And something that you and I are both fascinated by is shamanism. And that's what a lot of shamanism is seeing through the culture, like we were talking about that
right.
earlier this week, that shamans are creating a new culture. They're creating a new way of seeing and being in the world. And that's what that vision is you have a vision. I have a vision right now, and it's become our new way of seeing and being in our current iteration of Jeff and Dylan and the things that we're trying to do in our world. Because I've talked to you about that in many personal conversations, and this just feels like a personal conversation that we let everybody in on. And at some point, you have to realize that this life's about you. I mean, yeah, I love your neighbor and do good in the world and in society, but it's about you
right.
and your journey. And what are you trying to extrapolate from this experience so that you take this experience on to the next adventure when you leave this physical plane. And that's the only way we're ever going to get to all the things that people are wishing that we were already at, like we've talked about before, mm-hmm. as far as like world peace and hugging our neighbors and let's all hold hands around the world. We're just not there yet because not enough people have realized this thing is about me. And I mean that in a more of a, well, let's back up a little bit. I mean, it's not about you as far as like your Instagram and wanting to be a model and your Facebook page. It's about you as far as like spiritual experiences and
Right.
growing yourself as a soul. Not necessarily growing your bank account or your followers on Twitter or whatever crap that is. So while those tools are there and have helped in many ways, it's about growing your experience as an interconnected spiritual being on this plane. And if you could do that, then the next iteration of you outside of this physical limiting, which it is limiting. I mean, dude, if I wasn't in this body, I'd be flying right now. But I'm here and I'm, sitting in a wheelchair right now, and I'm got to do what I got to do to get through the next day. So, but yeah, it's an interesting time, and it's interesting how elevated it becomes when you realize that, hey, the whole world isn't about me, but in some weird way, it kind of really is.
That story about the alternate reality life with this other girl in this vision. What really it says to me is that like there's some sort of well source of imagination within inside human beings, and perhaps it's what separates us from animals. I don't know for sure, but this idea of imagination, we get to imagine realities, and then from there, those realities become thoughts, words, deeds, and physical manifestations of our imagination. I read an interesting interview just the other day. It was a journalist talking with, I believe it was a hypnotherapist, perhaps. And it was interesting because they were talking about this concept of the matrix, and the crux of it was that the hypnotherapist, who was a really brilliant individual, had worked with thousands of people or whatever the credentials were, but in his experience, he said that what people lack, what holds people back, is their ability to tap into their imagination or to let their imagination do what it's supposed to do. And so in the context of talking about the matrix, the therapist's position was that there really is no matrix. There really is no programming. Everybody talks about programming or societal engineering and this and that. There really is no program. It's just a fundamental inability to tap into your imagination, to imagine different realities, to even consider different possibilities. I mean, that could be something as simple as sitting at a desk job that you hate, listening to this podcast and wondering what it's like to live in Costa Rica. Well, do you wonder what it's like? Are you sitting there imagining what it could be like? If you can imagine it, can you not create that? Can you not experience it? But the hypnotherapist was talking about how, in his experience, in order to break people out of their depression, anxiety, this and that, what his main focus on was helping them to reignite their imagination. And what he said he was really good at, what he excelled at personally, was listening to people and asking them questions that helped them to re-spark their imagination. And with some people, it would take a few months or 6 months or whatever, but once that imagination got going again, their whole lives would change inside and out, night and day. So he would ask them things like, well, like what's your perfect idea of paradise or whatever? What can you imagine yourself? Or let's play a game here and let's just imagine a totally different universe. Tell me what you think the totally different universe would look like. And for most people, being hit with a question like that is really, really, really hard, like to answer. Like, it's really, really hard for people to switch into imagination mode, especially adults who do like, monotonous work or what have you. But through this process of just asking them to envision, and he told some of these stories about how, it took me a few months, but I had these really like, stringent, really serious individuals, sitting in my therapy sessions, and for hours and hours they would go on and on about how they created all these new universes with different types of seas and colors made out of jello and ships that they traversed it and all the different beings that they met, and basically create entire universes from their imagination, and then brought them forth through their word into this space. And by doing so, that completely liberated them from the limitations that they had, that they were trapped behind, the things that were holding them back. Man, it's kind of fascinating to me.
Well, it is fascinating, and as you're talking about it, I'm sitting here looking at a Boba Fett poster from Star Wars in one of these like imagined cities that George Lucas came up with,
right.
Because he worked in an industry of imagination, right? That's all it was about. It was about coming up with some fantastic science fiction thing. And I think that's why our culture today is so fascinated by sci-fi and superheroes and the lack of limitation, right? The ability and power to do whatever they want to do and the strength to overcome. And the funny thing is we all have that. And the beginnings of, like when you were saying to me or to everyone, the thing about, well, if you can imagine being in Costa Rica, you could live in Costa Rica, because that's the very beginning. It's just thinking about doing it. And that's how it happened for Aaron and I. That's how it happened for you and Anna. I mean,
I'll never forget, man. We were up in Washington State. We were living in Washington State. My wife was working from home. I was working from home in a sound studio for video games, man. And I wasn't really happy doing the work. And I remember surfing the internet one day, and I literally it just came across my browser somehow, man. It was like this finca for sale in Costa Rica, right? And I looked at that, man. It was this beautiful, traditional Costa Rican style looking house. It was on a hilltop overlooking these expansive scenic views of all these mountains and green agricultural beauty, and the sky was so clear. And I was looking at this, and I was like, this is fucking amazing. And it was like, nothing that we could afford or anything, but I sent an email to my wife. I was like, hey honey, why don't we sell it all and buy this place and move here? And she was a pretty serious business person at that time, and I was certain that she was going to either ignore it or write me back and be like, shut up and get back to work, Like 20 minutes later, she writes back, she's like, let's talk about it. I was like, holy smokes, here we go. And that was it. As soon as she said that, I was like, we're there. There's no turning back.
Well, and just let me interrupt you 1 second here. And just for all the people that didn't know Dylan when he lived in Costa Rica, I did. And while they didn't buy that finca, let me just tell you that Dylan lived in a house at the top of a mountain with expansive views of volcanoes that were freaking miles and miles away.
Toucans flying around.
Yeah, with views of other people's cattle and hotels, and on it went in a traditional Costa Rican home. So he didn't have to buy it. And I'm saying
I was gonna say that, but
realize that you can live the dream without having to pony up the dollars, right? Like, it's all possible.
But another way to look at that is,
what are you willing to do with or without in order to make it happen? Yeah,
another way to look at that is like the vision can manifest in multiple ways, because I remember like a year or two before I moved, I was literally standing on that hilltop where I used to live looking out, and I was like, wait a minute, this looks almost exactly like that photo that I sent my wife,
Yep.
I mean, it literally looks exactly like, it's astonishing. I was like, I manifested this somehow. I got that in my mind, and like I'm actually living that dream that I had sitting in my basement studio in Washington State, doing a job I didn't like, working for people that I didn't really care about, and working in an industry all my professional time was going into creating products that I didn't really, ethically, morally stand behind. Right. And I manifested that exact same vision, but the original version of it, I had put up all these obstacles to it, like, I can't afford this, or blah blah blah, whatever. I don't, whatever. But the reality is that it came to fruition just in a different style, maybe,
Right. Just a slightly different view.
Right.
But all of the things that you wanted happened, and the same thing happened for my wife and I. We moved to Costa Rica. We lived in an area that we'd never been in, and we didn't like it. And at first we're like, why did we do this? I don't really know if this is going to work out. And then we decided to go down to the beach. Let's go down to the beach. Let's go to the places that we went to when we fell in love with Costa Rica on vacation. Right. And dude, I mean, we hit Jaco, which we're coming down the mountain. We hit Jaco from San Jose. And she's looking at me and like elbowing me as I'm driving, and I'm looking at her with this big old grin on my face. And she's like, this is it. This is what we wanted. This is what we visualized. This was the reality that we wanted to realize in our lives. And dude, I mean, we literally stayed for like 3-4 days over my birthday, and we rented a house, and then we booked it back some ridiculous like 12-hour trip and got all of our shit, and we came back to the beach like a week later.
Yeah.
And we never looked back. We spent 10 years there. So and it was amazing, because all of a sudden we're in this foreign country. We didn't speak the language yet. We'd only been there for what, 2 months, and all of a sudden we felt like, okay, this feels like home. There's something calling me here, and I feel comfortable in this situation. And had we, I can tell you this, that had we been rigid to, well, we had this plan and we rented this place and we have to stay here, we wouldn't have made it. We would have never lived there for 10 years. We maybe would have made it 10 months.
Right. Yeah, I remember another time too in my life when I had just when I just got out of college and I just started working with audio. So I had developed like a little sound studio in my house and started seeking contract work and stuff in the video game industry as a sound designer. And I can't remember why I was inspired. At that time I was reading a lot of like really inspirational books and, really, just kind of just trying to cultivate goodness, and healing in my life. I was coming off like a long period of like drug addiction and a lot of like, just making poor choices. But I had this thing where I wrote down some goals on a piece of paper and I put them in my wallet. And one of the goals was, like I want to work in my own sound studio and at my own house. I want to work for myself in a house with this expansive view where I can see lightning and thunderstorms coming through. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, man, like 6-7 years later, I found myself working from home as a sound designer in Washington State with this amazing, subfloor studio. And then even further after that, the same thing in Costa Rica, like working on that hilltop there. I was working for myself, creating my own businesses and stuff. And I had that vision, and the paper was still in my wallet like some 6, 7, 8 years later. And I remember pulling it out one day and was like, holy cow, man. It's not like you knew that it was going to happen, but it's like you set up that thread with the universe and you subconsciously started following that thread and things came to fruition. So part of the moral of the story is to make sure you give yourself good visions for the future. I think without picking a port, without, thinking about what it is that you want to do, where you want to go, man, you're just kind of like a leaf in the wind, right?
Well, and you can't pick apart your dream while you're having the vision either, right? So you're having this vision, it's coming together. You can't throw well, wait, that's not going to work, because then it's gone. It's not going to work. It just poof, it's gone, right? So that's all part of it too. But not to get too biblical on people, but
definitely
you reap what you sow. It's absolutely true. Earlier this week, I was at my son's basketball practice for the Y I was talking about earlier, and the kids are all jacking around, and they're not listening to their coach, and they're clowning and all this stuff. And they were really good at the beginning of the season. They were like beating everybody, and now all of a sudden they're losing. They're starting to lose games, and they have a lot of talent and a lot of skill. But I told my son after the practice, I said, the way those kids were treating your coach was disrespectful, man. And I'm going to tell you something right now. The reason y'all are losing is because you play the way you practice. You are what you are. And if you practice, kind of loosey-goosey and throwing lazy passes, then y'all get in the game and you play loosey-goosey and you and they steal the ball and it's going the other way and you lose. And life is like that. In every facet, in every aspect, you have to practice. You have to put in practice the way you want things to pan out in action. So, and you reap what you sow. You plant those seeds. You cast that line out there, and if you cast that line out there thinking I'm not going to catch anything, you'll never catch anything. But if you cast your line out there with confidence, the big haul's coming in. And we did that yesterday with the barbecue trailer, this amazing spot. We interviewed these people. We've been stalking people and staking out their business like you should do, I think. And the guy was like, oh, yeah, I recognize you. I've seen you around here. He's like, you're doing the right thing. He's like, so where are you thinking to set up at? I was like, right here. And he's like, well, what if the spot's not here? I was like, well, it's going to be here. I just rented it today. And he was like, dude, that's what I like to hear, man. That's confidence right there. He's like, you don't even have your trailer yet, do you? I was like, no, they're building it right now. Yeah. And he was like, well, that's awesome, though, because you're in one of the best places in town. And I was like, well, I did my research. So, and you have to have that confidence, right? And you have to invest in yourself, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And we literally did that yesterday.
Yeah, I actually did that today, too, man. I'm putting together some new ideas. Don't want to go into them in detail just yet. But, I pulled the trigger on a really large purchase for something that I need to. It's an integral piece to fulfilling a vision I have for my future, right? you know, and when you're about to pull that trigger and you're like, oh man, this is a lot of dough, you know, and you're about to go through big time with the investments you're making. But as soon as you do that, man, you're like, wow, what a relief. Like, it's all this tension and anxiety building up to just, you know, hitting the, you know, yes, purchase button, right? And then as soon as you hit that button, there's no turning back. You know? No,
there's no turning back. That's for sure.
Man, that's another thing too, man. It seems like the biggest changes in my life, like the coolest things have happened whenever my wife and I have like, things weren't, you know, things had kind of gotten stale or whatever for work or for the relationship or whatever. And we felt that friction and that tension building up. And then we sat down and we talked about it, and we talked about the vision for our family, the vision for our future. And this has happened a few times, and that's how I've ended up living in Austin, Texas, Washington State, Costa Rica, and now in North Carolina. You know, every time it was preceded by, okay, things aren't really going exactly as we feel that we deserve, right? We deserve more happiness and easiness and more flow in life. So what is that about? What's missing here? And, you know, I can think of every conversation that's pushed us to a new spot. It's always happened, like, just comes out of the blue, and it's like, we need to have a conversation. And that conversation openly ends up bringing forth, like, what it is that we really, really see as how we want to live our future. And then within a very short time, like a day, we're like, okay, we know where we need to go next. And then we look at each other and we say, okay, are we 100% behind this? Like, is this where we're going? And then, I mean, within a day's time, like, everything can change. I mean, that's how I ended up out of Austin, Texas, after living there for 32 years. We had one of these conversations, and after 4 or 5, 6 hours of talking one night, it was like, okay, well, we just decided that we're not going to be happy unless we do this. So we're 110%. The next day, we're literally emptying out the attic of crap. You know, we're literally Craigslisting stuff. We're literally looking for new places to live. We just start in on the details instantly because there's no turning back. And furthermore, like, if you don't get started instantly, like, it just, like, that
it dissipates.
It dissipates, and that's soul crushing, man. You know, when you get excited about something and you choose to bury it, when you choose not to follow it, man, it's soul crushing. You know, and I know. And you have
to ignore the naysayers too, because I'm going to tell you, dude. I grew up in a trailer park in a freaking double wide trailer in nowhere, Texas, and I remember I wanted to do big things with my life, and man, I've lived in all the places that people told me you can't do that. I lived in San Francisco. Oh man, it's expensive. You can't live in San Francisco. Right. I lived in San Francisco for free in the military. Had an awesome experience. I lived in San Diego for free in the military. Had an awesome. Man, I've been coast to coast. I've lived in the armpit of the United States too. I won't mention where that is.
Oh, come on.
In case any of our listeners are.
Oh, come on. They know it's the armpit.
Pascagoula, Mississippi.
But, I was going to say Beaumont, but whatever. I was going to say Beaumont.
Hey, my mom's from Beaumont. Watch yourself. That's
an armpit.
Well, it is. There's a left and a right. Yeah, Pascagoula is the left armpit. Beaumont's the right armpit. Anyway, but you know what I'm saying? And then I remember all that happened. I came back. I got out of the military, and now it's all, you know, to be quite honest, you know, my folks were like, you need to just move home. You have this degenerative disease. All these bad things are going to happen to you. You need to just shut it down. And I was like, yo, I'm 21. I'm not shutting anything down. And I was like, I'm going to move to Austin. And they're like, you can't do that. It's expensive. You know, just be here in this little inexpensive thing. You know, everybody knows you. We'll figure something out. And before I knew it, I'm going to college. I'm in Austin. And then you know, we did that for a decade, and we were like, hey, man, we want to do this Costa Rica thing. And yet again, you're 29 and 31-year-old. You can't do that. What are you going to do? And we did it, and we did it for another decade. And then, you know, my wife and I were like, where would we go? We got this college-age kid. You know, they grow up on you all of a sudden.
They
and you got to figure out what are you going to do with them. And we were like, well, he wants to go to college. If we could go anywhere, where would we go? And we were like, hey, man, we do West Coast. I like that vibe. I lived out there a couple times. We've never lived in it, like, together. Let's try Oregon. And the same thing, man. People in Costa Rica was like, oh, man, it's expensive out there. Oh, man, you know, and there were the naysayers again. And now here we are, and things are great, and we live in an awesome area of Eugene, and we love it, and we're making friends. And now we're already we haven't even been here a year and a half, and we're already into, like, jumping into businesses and doing all kinds of neat things. Yeah. And it's because we don't have that, you know what I'm saying? I'm not I'm not a bridled horse. I don't let somebody yank my chain and pull me back. I've done it so many times. I know that those obstacles are illusions, and it's all something that if I walk into that screen, it's going to just go poof, and I'm going to walk right through it, because it's just a screen. It's the veil. It's not real. It's just a curtain. And if you pull back the curtain, on the other side is your success. On the other side is your goal, and you could totally achieve that.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And you talk about the illusion, these blockades, these illusions, and that's another type of vision too, right? So you get to choose what you're going to believe in, And
well, it's funny because the illusion is the delusion, right? And it gets you all negative and focused on the wrong things and delusional, right? Where you're losing your thought process, you're losing your ability to overcome obstacles and your problem-solving skills, and then you just become you're just another one of the naysayers. Then, and you're one of those people that says, "Oh no, I did that, I tried that." And how many people did we know, Dylan, and do we currently know that are, no, dude, Costa Rica, man, that's shitty. I tried that. Doesn't work. Doesn't work. You can't live there.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
I lasted 6 months. Well, I did 10 years. You did 7. So, I mean, we've got a full-grown teenager of experience between the two of us down there.
Yeah. I actually get to go back in a couple of weeks, man. I'm stoked about it.
I know. I mean, I'm jealous.
Yeah. And it's for the best reason too, as far as I'm concerned. It's to participate in working with sacred medicine, Iboga, and so you talk about visionary experiences there, man. Wow.
I know that's one that I need to have. Like we've been trying to get on the same page with the Iboga thing, but I'm just letting you get all lubed up and comfortable with it, and before you drag me down there with you.
Yeah, it's cool though, because I'm gonna go back and actually visit the town that we lived in and stuff, and so there's some sort of like closure, some sort of feeling of purpose and meaning to what we're doing now, because we had a moment where we were like, okay, cool, man, we've gotten what we needed out of this experience, and we're looking for something, another dynamic in life that we don't have here right now, and it has to do with the kids growing up and these things. And so, just the other day, like a few days ago, I was feeling kind of down and sour because I was in this rut of lack of imagination. I talked about this. I was at a point where I was like, okay, I'm not exactly sure where I'm supposed to go now. I trust that it's going to be revealed to me and that it's going to be clear to me at some point, but I wish it was clear now, but it's not. And I felt like it was like stuck on imagination. And so, what I realized at the point was that I'd already made the right decisions, like the things that we had moved here for, the things, in other words, it's kind of like setting up that note in my wallet. When we left Costa Rica, I'd put a note in my wallet. Here's what I expect to receive. Here's what I expect to experience out of the decisions I'm making. And really felt like those were coming true already. We were established in a freaking awesome place that we really love. We have a lot of friends, and we really came for the kids, for them to have new experiences, and they're all doing so great, man. They're learning so many new things that they could learn there and stuff. And so to get to go back there and sort of like complete the come full circle with the vision is it's cool. It's a really really honorable. I'm honored to have the experience. But man, I met a guy recently. I had tea with a guy named Clayton who runs a transformational music festival here close to us, and he was telling me about the visionary medicine peyote, and it's not something I've ever done, and that's pretty fascinating. He talked about it in a real traditional setting, but I guess my point is that there's ways of creating visions for yourself, and there's ways of experiencing visions for yourself with some of the stuff that I'm into.
Yeah, for sure. And I think also there's a part of something that you just said I was thinking about, and I kind of lost it here. You were talking about your vision and coming full circle,
right?
And so that just reminded me. When I would do shamanic work with people that were visiting Costa Rica, and this is something I want you to speak on for a minute here, because you've done more of the shamanic medicines with people and as a facilitator, and I've done more shamanic work with people as a facilitator with non-traditional medicines, just like vision questing and counseling kind of. But people would come and they would have an experience, and they would think that they were a completely different person. They were totally changed. And then inevitably they would have this little ting of fear because they were about to go back to the United States. And I would tell them all the time, yeah, it's easy, right? It's easy now because you've left the people that have hurt you. You've left all these memories behind. You've left this condition and this situation that you're used to living in that has been holding you back for so long. And you're in Costa Rica, and everything's green and everything's growing and all the fruit tastes like candy, and it's the best experience of your life. And you've met all these new people, and you can see the endless possibility. But here's how you know you have changed, is if you can take the lessons that you've learned here, and then you can go face that life. You can go face that lion and stand there in your power and say, hey, I'm not going to allow this thing to control me anymore. I see this new vision of who I am, and I'm not all the way there, but I'm polishing in my armor, and I'm going to be this resilient, bright, knight that can overcome my situation. And unfortunately, I've seen it happen in both ways. I've seen it where the people, took up the mantle and overcame their situation, and then I've seen it where they just fall right back into it because it wasn't really their time, and it was more comfortable and easier. Easier is probably I don't know about the comfort, but it was easier just to keep riding that roller coaster.
Yeah, I mean, you're dealing with sacred experiences, be it plant medicine, shamanism, or just shamanic practices. Drumming. What did you say? Like
vision questing, journeying, all that kind of.
Yeah. So you're dealing with sacred, really sacred practices, and so when people approach these practices with sincerity, then it makes the integration of what they learned more possible. Now, in my experience, like that sincerity, like for people that experience this in the first time, like you don't really know what you're getting into, and you're coming from a culture and you're bringing a lot of personal baggage and a lot of cultural baggage into that space. And so not to cheapen it, but sometimes people have to be hit over the head a few times with the club to understand what they're really dealing with. Yep. But I think ultimately what you're talking about is this process of integration, and people don't get that. People might generally arrive in these spaces thinking that the ceremony is the work, but in reality, what you learn when you keep coming back, and when you, like I said, when you approach these with sincerity, the sincerity and sacred respect that they deserve, then you start to realize that the experiences themselves are just catalysts. Like that's not really what it's about. It's about you becoming the type of person that you can be becoming. It's about you ultimately fulfilling that higher vision of yourself. And, speaking from my personal experience, it took me quite a while to really understand that what was happening after the ceremony was much more important in most cases than what was happening in the ceremony. Like the ceremony itself was just a clue, was just a possibility of how I could be living and who I could be and who I needed to be and who I really deep down wanted to be, So I think really the process of integration is different for everybody, and it is tough to come back to, to like regular life and live that, for speaking for myself again, I was exposed to this stuff continuously for a number of years. And so now that I'm back here, like that stuff is, most of it's integrated. But what I'm realizing right now is I haven't done medicines in a while, because I'm not around them, and they're illegal in the US, but I'm realizing that like the experiences are calling on me more and more now than perhaps ever in the past to rise up and to evolve into that person that I saw, like, into those moments in an iboga ceremony where I saw myself living this amazingly fruitful, happy, joyous life surrounded by people that I loved, and, really helping them to become themselves and really just like having an amazing, fulfilling, loving life. I would see myself in these visions doing so. And, if you're overexposed to that stuff, then you forget also that the process of integration is really what it's about. So it's kind of been cool. I was a little worried when I left Costa Rica that I wasn't going to be around this stuff enough. But what I'm seeing now is that like the challenge has really been put to me now to to truly really integrate like the deepest parts of what I've learned. And it's been years, right? It's been
so now you're in the process of your further evolution, right? And I knew you would unpack that. And I'm using the word unpack on purpose because I see it as, okay, so you do iboga, you do ayahuasca, which I have done, and it's like opening Pandora's box, right?
Can be,
and
yeah.
that's what it is. You open the box. What iboga to me, and what ayahuasca, and even doing just journeying and vision questing in traditional shamanism through drumming, to me, what it is okay. So you don't feel so good, you go to a doctor. For just to make this something that people will understand.
Right.
You don't feel good, you go to a doctor because you don't have an open wound. You don't have but you have a fever. You don't feel well. You don't understand what's going on. So you go to the doctor, they do some blood work. All of a sudden you get clarification because you realize you have some kind of infection inside that you couldn't see. Right. And that's what, to me, shamanism does. It shows you the infection in your life that's inside. It's not on the surface. You can't necessarily see it. And then once that is exposed, well, then the work really begins. And the visionary part, the ayahuasca part, it's just like you said, it's the catalyst. It's like cutting open the tape on the box. It's the knife that cuts it open, and then you have to unpack the box, right? And then inside of that box, though, that seems like it's full of problems, the deeper you go, on top, it's like, oh, man, that's shitty. Oh, man, that sucks. And then the deeper you go, you're like, oh, wait, that solves that. Oh, wait, this solves this. Wait, this answers that question. And the deeper and deeper you go, the more you will expose, but then the more you unpack and the more you realize, hey, man, this is all a process. And the further I process, mentally process the process, the more I'm growing as a human and as a spirit, and the more actualized I become. And I'm really glad that you spoke on that, because I knew you were going to take the ball and run. I knew you were going to kind of wrap that up in the way that I was hoping you would there.
It took me a few years of journeying with these medicines to really understand what I got myself into, and what ultimately happened was I came to the point where I looked forward as much to what would happen when I got home from the ceremonies as I did the ceremonies. And the ceremonies are exciting and incredibly fascinating, mysterious, and mind-blowing in so many ways. And the whole process of ceremony and holding space and allowing, a group of people that are willing and accepting the sacred energy into their lives and acting and behaving in accordance, with the respect and honor that honoring that sacred energy is amazing in itself. But I came to really look forward to how I was going to feel after I got home, and I sort of got into the habit of doing a lot of journaling. And I remember a point where some number of years back, but I spent some time in the jungle, a few weeks in the jungle or whatever, and I came back and it inspired me to like journal every morning like crazy. I was getting up at like 3 o'clock in the morning every morning, turning on the lamp in the living room, and I'd get some good like strong tea and maybe some tobacco or whatever, maybe even some ganja sometimes, and get into a real meditative state and just start writing and writing and writing. And one day after like doing this for like 2 or 3 weeks, man, every single day I was just so inspired to like get this out and to like, understand the experiences I'd been having. And I remember one day it came to me, it just hit me like it was like a revelation, right? I realized that, okay, what I'm doing to myself right now is like the shaman's work, right? Like I'm diving deeper and deeper and deeper into it, and I'm looking for an answer, but I know the answer is already there. And the answer, of course, is that I have the answer, right?
Right.
It's this kind of like, it's like being on an infinity loop, somewhere. And then when you realize that you're the one that has the answer, you realize like that's the shamanic power. It's not that you intentionally do something. It's just that that you're doing is the something. It's
right.
It's a paradox, but it was a huge breakthrough for me because I was dealing with some physical health challenges at the time. But it was an enormous breakthrough for me to realize that, oh, okay, I'm the one doing the healing, right? I'm the one that's responsible for the healing. Now I may go take myself to a shaman and let him do his work on me, but I'm the one that has to first get myself there, right? You know, I'm the one that has to open up my mind and my consciousness and allow these other possibilities in without, you know, critical judgment, you know, and allow myself to absorb everything in that space without blocking it by my own, you know, preconceived notions or, you know, baggage or, you know, just bullshit or whatever. And then, so I'm the one that has to then go home and integrate that. And that's really, I think, what the shaman does is they just make it, like, they just do, right? They just say, okay, we have this power, we're going to do this. And it's about responsibility for, like the magic that we all have. You know, you just take charge of that magic unicorn dragon or whatever it is inside of you and say, I'm the one in control of this magical beast, and anything's possible, you know? And
and it all goes back here. We come full circle on the you do you.
Oh boy.
When you said, you know, it's up to you. It's up to you to heal your life. You can't put that power in anyone else's hands, because even the most fantastic, magical, culture destroying or building shaman, however you want to look at it, can't heal you. It's up to you. It's ultimately a choice that you have to make. And it is interesting how these things are catalysts, like we talked about a couple of times now. And I just want to share this part as we wrap up the show here. I used to see Dylan, because Dylan would have to come down through my hood on his way to do ayahuasca. And I would see Dylan, and he'd be like this little frazzly, you know, talking fast, yeah, man, and this and blah, blah, blah.
Thanks for that, Jeff. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Dylan would go, and I wouldn't see him for like 10 days. And then Dylan would come back, and he'd be like all kind of quiet and pensive and rolling his tobacco, because he'd been smoking tobacco with the shamans and stuff, and talking all chilled and like, yeah, man, that was really great. And I want to say the thing that was interesting about that was seeing the process in person, like seeing how much you could evolve in 10 days. And then what was also really special about it was you would always talk to me about how excited you were to go see your family and how you were going to integrate this stuff into your life, and how much it was going to change your relationship with your wife, with your children. But what was also neat about that was I got to see the untethered Dylan, right? I got to see you broke free of the family. You came down, you saw me, you had the frazzle, been changing diapers. Yeah. You had all that stress and all that funny energy, and then you went and you released it all, and you got perspective on it, and you realize, hey man, I'm all in. Like this is what I want to do, and this is right where I should be. And not only that, I just improved myself, and now I want to take this new improved Dylan, you know, this new iteration and evolution of who I am, which I know we've said that a lot, but that's what this show is all about. And I'm going to share that with my family, and I have a new vision of how I can be within that unit. And that goes back to the thing we were talking about earlier about this life's about you, right? And you realize that early on, and you went and made a better you. And if you make a better you, then you give your children a better father. You give your wife a better husband. You know, you give society a better person. And that's what I meant. And when I was saying this life's about you, because the better you can love you, the more you become lovable to others. And the more forgiving you become, because you're able to forgive yourself and forgive society and just take it for what it is and keep growing. And yeah, man, I love this show today. This has been awesome. It's been fun.
Yeah, that's real change. That's really changing the world right there, man. It's much more meaningful than voting, you know. And you know, I was thinking about one last comment. You know, I've seen a lot of people in ceremonies in a lot of different contexts, and two people can come from the same background, you know, theoretically, whatever, hypothetically, and they can come there for the same hypothetical reasons, and they can do the same things. They can drink the same amount of potion and eat the same amount of iboga, right? And they can get the same care and attention from the shamans on duty or whatever it is. But if one of them shows up with an open mind and an open heart and a willingness and you know, seeking that inspiration to make the change themselves, that person's going to go back and they're going to avoid those pitfalls like you mentioned earlier. But the other person comes in, all the same, you know, controlling all the variables, right? But they come in, they bring a controlling mindset. They bring I already know what's going to happen mindset. They bring a mindset of, I'm expecting this person to heal me. I'm expecting to come here and be healed and then go back. And, I'm expecting all of the work to be done for me. Like, that person will be frustrated with the outcomes of their experience and probably won't come back, at some point. So,
right.
And it's like, it's not a judgment either way. People are going through different things, but it's a simple manifestation of the idea that what you put into the experience is what you get out of it.
Absolutely.
So
you play the way you practice, brother.
Yeah, there you go, man. Basketball, baby. So yeah, man, it's been good talking to you today, Jeff. Let's wrap it up, my friend. You got anything to tell these nice, fine, wonderful, amazing people listening today?
Well, like I always say, you can find Dylan at wakingtimes.com. You can find me at journeytoinnersage.com. Please keep subscribing to our YouTube channel, Redesigning Reality, and we're also online, redesigningreality.com. If you don't want to watch a video, you just want to listen to a podcast. So we also have an audio version only. So check us out. Tune in.
On the go. Thank you, people. Much love. Peace.
Ciao.
You've been listening to Redesigning Reality with Jeff Anthony and Dylan Charles.
Mukabona, mukabona.